Hey everyone, and welcome to the channel. I'm Tom, and today we're going to be wrapping up the month of October, which for me was a very interesting reading month. I don't think I have done this since I first started the Cosmere, and I read the entire Mistborn Era 1 trilogy in a single month, and that is because I read a lot of Sun Eater. I actually only read one thing novel-wise that was not a part of the Sun Eater world, so we're going to go ahead and talk about a lot of Sun Eater here before we get into that, and that consists of Kingdoms of Death, Ashes of Man, the Dregs of Empire, and then I have not finished Disquiet Gods yet, but I'm still working my way through here on Disquiet Gods. So if you are tired of hearing me talk about Sun Eater, I promise we are in the home stretch of that, and that will be done soon. And I do have some non-Sun Eater stuff to talk about. But let's go ahead and start off with Kingdoms of Death, which is actually going to end up being my book of the month. This is not my favorite Sun Eater book. If I had to rank Sun Eater right now, and this is just off the top of my head without really thinking about it too hard, it is probably Howling Dark, Demon in White, Kingdoms of Death, Ashes of Man. That's probably where it's sitting at, but I don't know. I'd have to really think about it. But anyway, let's go ahead and talk a little bit more about Kingdoms of Death. And the more I get away from this book, the more I think I like it. Just this book is a hard read. Like it is disheartening. It is a down, and it just keeps going down and down and down. The things that Hadrian goes through in this book, and I think that's the point of this book, because up until this point in the series, it feels like a lot of triumphs, a lot of success, and then Kingdoms of Death happens, and it all comes crashing down in a brilliant way. I think at the time I was reading it, it was a lot to take in, a lot to like process and deal with, and so much negativity. And as I've had some time to step away from that a little bit, I can appreciate what it was doing for the story. And maybe it's just because I have read more into the series, and so I can kind of look back at Kingdoms of Death with a little bit more of a retrospective of what has happened since Kingdoms of Death, and just appreciate it a little bit more. And I like a grim story, so I think that is part of what is getting this like higher and higher up in my rankings. And so I'm very curious on, as I finish Disquiet Gods and then obviously get into Shadows Upon Time, if this is another book that rises in esteem as I keep going. I don't think it will still touch Howling Dark. Like Howling Dark is a truly special book. I gave it a 5-star, which means a lot for me. But Kingdoms of Death, it breaks you down. And I think there are series that have this problem where it's almost too triumphant the entire time through a series, where it's just too successful. And it's like there's a difference between some of that like classical fantasy where you like good versus evil, good triumphs over and over again. But even in those, you still have those downs. But it's easy to just have that like linear success over and over again. And I think Kingdoms of Death in Sun Eater just has like a great way of bringing it down and showing you just like how awful everything can be. You get hints of how bad things are throughout the series. You see some really horrific stuff. There's like body horror stuff. You hear about all of the awful things happening to humanity. You see some of it in, what is it, Queen Amid Ashes, the novella, but like you see a different side of it, and it's a much more personal side, because that's another thing that I think happens in a lot of these big epic battles where you don't see the personal effects. Like you see like all of this devastation and destruction, and this is happening, but because it happened to the character that we have been aligned with, the character that we have been with, and just seeing everything through their eyes through this entire story, to see what they end up going through and the things that happen and affect them the way that they do. I think it's just a brilliant book, and it's done so well. And it just focuses that lens so small, so you can really like feel it. Like, you see it everywhere where it's like you hear a big number and you're like, that's a big number, but you don't like conceptualize like how tragic something is. And I think this book just does a really brilliant job of showing that, because this is a series that plays with time and space and things in a way that not a lot of other series do, and bringing it into, I don't want to say like a more human like scope, but like into this narrow focus, I think is brilliant and really works super well for the series, and just like absolutely it was needed. And like I said, as I get further and further away from it, the more I appreciate this book, even though it was a very traumatic read. And then that will bring us to Ashes of Man, which is the next book in the series. I did technically read something in between these to break it up a little bit, but we'll keep this Sun Eater chunk going. And Ashes of Man, I had originally heard that Ashes of Man and Kingdoms of Death were supposed to be one book, and that they got too long and they had to split it or something like that. And when I was reading Kingdoms of Death, I didn't feel it. I didn't feel like that was a real thing. Like it felt like a very well done, contained book. I didn't feel like there was like this weird end or a beginning. Like it didn't feel weird. But when I got to Ashes of Man, the first real chunk of this, I did feel it a little bit more. It felt like, okay, I see where this was definitely too long to go through and do in Kingdoms of Death because it would have been an extremely long book. But also, it almost felt like maybe it got extended a little bit more than we needed in Ashes of Man. But towards the end of Ashes of Man, and I feel like I can skip so much of Ashes of Man, even though a lot happens and things, and you know all of that. And I think it is actually a really good come down from Kingdoms of Death with how Kingdoms of Death ends. Like you need that beginning part of Ashes of Man to like recenter and like it gives you time to breathe after the events of Kingdoms of Death, and it gives you that time in Ashes of Man. But it did feel very repetitive, and it just feels, I don't know, a little strange in the greater scope of this the story from my perspective and what I have read. But as we get towards the end of this book, as it feels like a lot happens in these Sun Eater books, as the end really starts to like all the pieces have been laid and we really start rolling. You know, this is a devastating book as well, and you know, I have a joke with my friend who I'm reading this at the same time, where we just send each other really sad gifts, or we say, "Surely things are going to get better," and I don't know if things are actually going to get better, but this book, you know, if you know, you know, and it's yeah, that's I don't want to say too much more because obviously this is book what 5 of a 7 book series. Like you can't say too much, but definitely a devastating book. I was in denial the entire time. I didn't until it happened. I was in denial, complete denial. Did not think, you know, I had ideas, and you know maybe at some point I can talk spoilers about this series, but I thought something completely different was going to happen than what happened. And yeah, it was you know, I just like stopped reading in the moment and just kind of like sat there for a while. And yeah, because I can't even say that because it's just it feels too spoiler. So just you know, Ashes of Man, it is that weird book for me in Sun Eater where the ending it's all so well done, and I can see now after reading both of these books like how they could have been one book that it would have been like a monstrosity. Like we're talking bigger than Wind and Truth levels of long. So I can definitely see how those were, a lot of the ideas were all supposed to be fused into one at one point and had to be separated because you know they got too far. And then that leads us to the last Sun Eater thing that has finished so far, which is the novella The Dregs of Empire. This is probably my least favorite thing I have read in the Sun Eater universe. Not that it's bad or anything, it's just I have had kind of a not a problem, but like in a series like this, I've had the same experience with The Wheel of Time, The Expanse, like even a lot of the Stormlight Archive stuff, where you have this like ensemble cast, and as the story goes on, you're supposed to care more and more and more about certain characters, right? Like the characters who are just kind of sideline characters, peripheral characters, they start to you know become more integral into the story. And a lot of times for me, I never get to the point where I care about those characters. And so because this story follows a character from that periphery, even though they definitely become more and more important. And this is actually one of the characters who, if I was like tier ranking ones who I ended up caring about as they came more into the story, they would be higher up. I don't know if I really needed this story. I was told that this story, The Dregs of Empire, really ends up playing into some stuff that happens in Disquiet Gods. Which, if that's true, like I'm glad I'm read it, and I'm, you know, even though I haven't read the short stories yet, I will probably go back and read this. Like I want to read everything that I can about this universe. It's amazing. I really love it. But I don't know. Part of me is like, did I spend what this is like a 10-hour, 9-hour long audiobook? Were those 9 or 10 hours that I could have spent to be even further into Disquiet Gods? And I'm doing the math. I'm like, if I had done that, I'd almost be done with Disquiet Gods. And so maybe that's playing into my, I don't want to say lack of enjoyment. It's really well done. The story is interesting. It's just maybe I wasn't in a time and place where I wanted to go read this offshoot before going to Disquiet Gods. But I will say, you know, I don't know. I haven't finished the series yet if it's something you need to read, but I think if you once you get to the point where you can read this, if you really care about the character that it follows, then yeah, you're going to want to read this and everything. And I don't know, it was a good time. It wasn't anything crazy, but you know, I'm trying to complete as much Sun Eater as I can before the gala. And then that brings us to Disquiet Gods, which I think just a little over halfway, maybe not like right around halfway point in Disquiet Gods. And once again, don't want to say too much, huge spoilers because you know we're so far in, so I'm going to be careful. But this is going back to kind of the mind blowing scale that this series has. Once again, time is just played with the scale of like everything that's going on. Um, it's brain breaking a little bit if you're not like locked in. If you're like this isn't something where you can kind of like just be barely paying attention. There's like big epic things happening, and I'm just like, whoa, this is maybe not taking, this is maybe going in a direction that I didn't think we were going to get, but I'm invested. I'm intrigued. I'm ready to see what happens as the series continues, or this book continues. I mean, we only have one more book at this point, but I'm curious on what is going to happen. I feel like we just had kind of like that first climax in the book, and we're probably going to have a little down before we get to the like that last quarter of the book where I'm assuming things will pick back up again. And I'm just really curious on what's going to happen. There's, I mean, some big changes for our characters in here that I was not ready for at all. And I do have a complaint with that, but I can't say what it is because it is such a spoiler for this point in the series. Just know that I do have a complaint about something going on there that maybe, like I said, maybe at some point I'll get to talking spoilers about this series, and I can talk about some of those complaints with a little bit more concrete. But so far, I think the way this book is setting up, that this has the potential to maybe be a favorite, because some of the things it's already playing with early on are part of this series that I really, really like. When it does expand and like goes a little weird, right? That is some of the stuff that I have really enjoyed here in Sun Eater. So hopefully we'll see how that continues and as that wraps up. Like I said, Kingdom's Death was my book of the month. You can see kind of Sun Eater has taken over. We are very close to being out of this, and you know, it's been fun and also strange to go back to reading all of the series kind of like this close together. Like I said, haven't done it since like 2023 with the Cosmere. And even in the past, I've normally been, okay, I have like a main series that I do about a book a month with, and then, you know, have a bunch of other stuff that fill in the gaps in between. And so it's been an interesting experience to go back and do it this way. And I will say the one thing it is doing, it is making me blend things together. Like, when exactly did this happen? Which books did these things happen? And I'm looking at more as one giant story instead of individual books, which is interesting in its own right. It's something that happened with Wheel of Time for me. Like, those last 4 to 6 Wheel of Time books for me are like, I read them almost all back to back to back, and they're all just like one giant story for me, which Wheel of Time, I think, you know, tends to be a little bit more than some other series. But that has been the Sun Eater saga. We're getting so close. The gala's coming. It's going to be a good time. But that leads me with one thing that I read this month that was not a part of Sun Eater, and that is Rita Hayworth and the Shawshank Redemption by Stephen King. This is once again a novella, and this is a novella that the further I get away from it, the more I like it. Like, I said this when I first talked about it, that this is like, from a writing perspective, and I'm not, once again, I'm not a writer, but to me it's like, this story is, it's lean, it has great characters, great plot beats, just everything about it. It's like so close to perfection for a story that, like, the more I think about it, I'm just like, my mind is blown by the things that King did in this book, and it's great all the way throughout. I had such a good time with it. If you have not read any Stephen King, like, this is maybe another place where I would point you to start with. It definitely has some of like the King, I'll call them the King isms, where like there's just some things like Stephen King does in his work that it's there, and if those things are like non-negotiables for you, like, his stuff is never going to work for you. But this is just like an absolute masterclass of like writing to me. And you know, I think maybe one thing that helped for me is I only really knew like the very ending. I haven't seen this movie. I don't know if I've ever watched the movie the whole way through. And if I had, it has been so long ago that I really just remember the ending. So like, I got to experience this pretty fresh as far as everything that went on. Like, I didn't know a lot of the things that went on. I didn't realize how like long this story is, like, timeline wise, and all of that just worked so well together. It just bit by bit, it builds and builds and builds and builds, and very satisfying ending, which is normally such a knock against King. And yeah, like, I know I said Kingdoms Death is my book of the month, but this is like right up there. And this is one of those books where I could see in 2 years from now looking back at it and being like, no, this needs to like move up my rankings. Like, that's just kind of how it is staying with me. This book has staying power for me, which is crazy when you think that it's a very short novella. It takes, you know, no time at all to read. And yeah, so I had a great time with it, and I'm looking forward to reading more King as we move forward too. And then I do just want to quickly talk about my absolute monumental failure for the month, and that is this book here, Grand Conspiracy by Janie Wertz. I had originally planned on at least starting it to being, I originally wanted to be like as close to halfway as possible, if not finished with this month. And I'm still on page 1. And part of that has been because I really just committed to Sun Eater. I wanted to make sure, because, you know, the gala's coming up, I have like real hard concrete plans with that this kind of got just pushed to the wayside. I really made sure to dedicate any extra time that I could have probably been reading this. I was reading Sun Eater, or I've mentioned this a little bit, I was also playing Pokemon, and yeah, that definitely took in some time. So that is definitely a failure for me for this month. But on the novel side, that is kind of what has been going on. So we'll quickly talk about comics slash manga because I do have a little bit of manga I can talk about for this month. And this is one that has sat with me because I finished it earlier in the month, and that is Vinland Saga. If you don't know, Vinland Saga is one of the what people kind of point to as the three like kings of manga. That's maybe a little extreme. I'm sure somebody who's way more versed in this could give me a lesson. But it's kind of Berserk, Vinland Saga, and Vagabond are kind of looked at as these like three pinnacles of really long series that may or may not ever get finished. And fortunately, Vinland Saga was able to be finished. Unfortunately for me, the more I sit with the ending, the more dissatisfied I get. And I'm not normally somebody who cares so much about endings. I even have like a whole video on why I think endings are overrated. But I think maybe the problem I'm having with Vinland Saga is the ending doesn't feel like an ending at all. It feels like the ending of a chapter or the ending of a book in a series that like, okay, it's ambiguous enough. We're like, yeah, we can leave it. We can go. The message of the series that I think it's trying to get across to you, I think has been achieved. So like it's satisfying enough. You can have it. But to me, it's just disappointing. And I get why, the author doesn't want to continue with it, the violence, all of this stuff, like they feel like they've accomplished their goal, which is huge and it's great. And, for me, unfortunately, it's not it. Unlike I think a lot of people, because a lot of people who have stuck with the series for as long as I have are just like big epic mega fans because you don't spend as much time waiting for chapters and everything to come out and be caught up on a series like this if you don't love it. For me, this series has had its ups and downs. I think the first arc delivers you something and kind of lays out a promise of what the series is going to be that it then never comes back and delivers on. To a certain extent, I really think like the next arc after that is really like, to me, it's not that great. It's a real downside for me. And then later on, it really picks back up until the very, very end. And really just this kind of last couple of chapters, I've been honestly really just the last chapter. And I don't know. I can't really put my finger on it without getting into spoilers, but I just feel like so much is left to just be left up. Like, yeah. So it's just, I don't need to go on about Vinland Saga for too much longer than that. Just, it's one of those ones where if you have really enjoyed the anime, I would say keep watching it. You probably will enjoy 99% of the story. You're going to have a good time with it. If you're somebody who's still interested in reading the manga, I still think you should. Like, there's so much brilliance in the series, but just know for me, because there are plenty of people who really love this ending, who think it's beautifully done, I am left wanting and disappointed, unfortunately. And I don't like to be negative, especially on a series that would still probably be in like my top, couple manga of all time. Like it'd be on the bottom end of that list, but like that's still where it lands. And so I don't know, maybe I just feel a little like burned by what ended up going on there. And then on the actual comic front, I am 2/3 of the way done with the second compendium of Invincible. The new season is coming soon. I want to finish that. This story is another one that has taken turns that I was not ready for. Big epic scale battles. It's been really great, and I'm super excited to see some of this stuff animated because I think something that the animation can do that is not in the comics is, especially the battles. The battles have been super well done for me in the comic, or not the comic, in the animation. That there's some really awesome battles that I have read that happen in the comics that I'm excited to see them drawn out, and it's not like two pages, which is like what, 8 panels if you're lucky, depending on it. Like there's some things that I know that will be big and epic on the screen that they are in the comic, but just not in the same way. So that has also been really good. And then just really quickly, I already mentioned this is going to be like stuff that I have watched slash just random other stuff. Pokemon ZA, Legends ZA, I have played way too much of that. I would probably, honestly, I really think that if I hadn't been playing Pokemon as much as I have been, I would already be done with the Squad Gods. So that probably can tell you enough of how much I have played it. It's been fun. There's a lot of complaints for it online, and to me, it's just like some of those complaints I get. Some of them are like, I don't know what you expected, and then also just in general, it's like it's good enough. Like it's not amazing. Should it have been as expensive as it is, like an $80 game on the Switch 2? Probably not, but it is what it is. Also, just I did watch The Gremlins and The Mist this year for Halloween and stuff. Which The Gremlins, after watching it, it 100% is a Christmas movie. I know some people in the comments mentioned that as well, and that's what I told my fiance, but she still wanted to watch it because she'd never seen it. And my parents have a dog that looks way too much like Gizmo. It's actually hilarious. And then The Mist makes me just want to read The Mist by Stephen King. I think it's probably, I mean, it's funny because that movie looks almost low budget-ish, but like it's pretty, like, I enjoyed it. Like, the ending is obviously the thing that people talk about when it comes to the Mist for the movie. So I definitely do want to read it. And like, I have a physical copy of it, so that definitely moves it up the list. And then the last thing I spent really any time watching was America's Strongest Man. I had a friend or multiple friends competing at America's Strongest Man this year, and then the Rogue Invitational, which was the last big strongman major, is what they call it, happened this weekend, and that was a lot of fun to watch. Mitchell Hooper comes back after stem cells and all kinds of crazy stuff to just barely beat out Trey Mitchell, who was way slower on the stones than I thought. But that's enough of all of the random rambling stuff. Once again, Sun Eater is almost off the menu if any of you are very tired about hearing just one series over and over again. Very, very close. Just 2 books left, and then we'll get back to Malazan is starting to call my name. I think December might be the return of Malazan. So if you're excited for that, let me know down below in the comments. Hit me up on the Discord that is linked in this. But remember, as always, read what you want when you want.